Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Today, I am excited because we have the U.S. Secretary for the Department of Education, Linda McMahon, with us. Madam Secretary, thank you for joining me.
Tudor, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, I am excited too. I wanted you to know that we have people here in the state of Michigan who are wondering exactly what it means, what you're doing. They have heard that the Department of Ed is going to shut down. And they're concerned, what does that mean for my kids' education? And that's why I thought you can explain this better than anybody, that this is not something to be afraid of, but there is a lot of fear mongering from Democrats. So give us the lowdown on what that means.
Well, thanks, Tudor, for asking. And it's not an uncommon question. But clearly the president believes, as do I, that the best education is that's one closest to the child. And so his reference is, let's give education back to the states. And what that means is let's get rid of the bureaucracy that is in Washington. That does not mean get rid of Title I funding that will come to the states. It does not mean get rid of IDEA funding, which is for our handicapped or special needs children. So that is not the goal or the mission of getting rid of the bureaucracy in education, but it puts education more squarely in the state's hands, working with parents, working with teachers, working with local superintendents. And that's where it ought to be.
I think that's the confusion. I think people don't understand that the Department of Ed on your state level is really what is managing all of the decisions statewide. Like those decisions that come from the federal level, the funding that comes from the federal level is much smaller compared to the state level. We are on a state level funding our own schools.
Yeah, you fund about 90%. And about 10% comes from the federal government. And that funding often comes with strings attached. So a lot of the states will say to us, we really love to get the funding, but we would like to have the ability to spend that money in the way that we see fit. Because one superintendent might say, I'd like to take that money and spend it in District X because I know that that's where that funding is needed. So at that point, there would be more flexibility to utilize the funding, for the states. And I think that's a big goal.
If the Department of Ed is no longer there, where does the funding come from? Does it go through a different agency? And is the reason behind that you don't really need an entire 4,000 person department to decide where these funds go, because you already have Treasury and other departments that could easily decide where funds go?
Well, that's correct. And there are other agencies that I think the entire programs could be managed through. But the Department of Education does not educate one child. We don't decide on curriculum. We don't hire teachers. We don't decide what books to buy. We really are a funding channel and helping to develop policy that is, if it's approved by Congress or, it's passed through to the states. But that's the function of the Department of Education. And it really, hopefully, would be improved at the state level because you would have eliminated the bureaucracy of it. And that's really the goal.
And when you talk about bureaucracy, I think some people don't necessarily know what that means. I mean, there are a lot of people that are in Washington, these big agencies, they've become overbearing. They've become hard to take care of in and of themselves because the cost is so great to have 4,000 or 4,600, whatever it is, at the Department of Ed or whatever it was when you took over at the Department of Ed, that are really just making decisions that don't affect the individual child.
Well, that's correct. As a matter of fact, when I did take over as the secretary, we did have about 4,200 people. We're down about half of that now because we've gone through a restructuring process here, as was the goal. And it is the goal across all of government at this point to look at where we might cut expenses without, cutting services, and that every agency in government has been involved in doing that. So we're dealing right now with many fewer people than we had when I first began. But, the bureaucracy is, if you've got people sitting in Washington trying to make decisions about what's happening in a state. I'll give you a perfect example. I was asked by one parent in a state, or a teacher, I don't remember which it was, relative to special needs funding. And I said, well, let me ask you something. I said, who better to determine that? Would it be at the state level or at the local level where the teacher is working with that child with special needs and understands what kind of programming, how they should adjust their individual learning program for that student? Or is it someone sitting in Washington, D.C. that has absolutely no connection with that child? I said, I think the answer is absolutely obvious. So the bureaucracy in between the money that has been appropriated and coming, through Congress and the state level of execution and employment of those dollars is, I think, a better path if we don't have the bureaucracy of the Department of Education in between.
Yeah, and I think the fear that parents have as well, if it's not there, then that money can't come to us anyway. The money will still come. It's going to be decided on the state level. Everybody has a state superintendent. You have a state Department of Ed. This is one of those states' rights issues where we really want to do it locally. And there should be nothing more local than education, because your community is different than the community next to you. And that's how the state decides what each area needs for funding and what they need when it comes to specialists and teachers and all of that. That should go to the state level. Now, there is a big controversy right now over protecting women in sports. We know that the president, that's one of his top issues, is to protect women in sports. I know that you obviously have a sports background. You are very top of mind for protecting women in sports. But let me ask you this, like in Michigan, we have the MHSAA, the Michigan High School Athletic Association, and they are saying they're not going to comply with what the president has said. They oversee Michigan sports. They're an association, but they are actually funded by the school district. So how do you manage that situation?
Well, they're in defiance of the law, because Title IX was clearly established to protect women in sports and to make sure that they were not discriminated against. And so it's simply following the law at this point. So they're breaking the law. So if that case was referred to the Department of Justice, there could be an investigation there, or there could be some defunding mechanisms that would be put in place relative to, the state or the districts which are not complying.
I'd love to say that I would think that there's a chance on the state level that someone would do something. But in this state, we have an attorney general that I don't think would side with Trump on this. In fact, she's come out and she's been pretty hostile. So that is that is the situation. And I think for some conservatives, they say we still need that protection from Washington, D.C., because we don't have, if we are in a blue state or a purple state that has blue leaders, we don't have that protection. And that's where there are some conservatives that are kind of holding out hope that there is some protection from the federal government, but you say that will still be there.
For sure, if the law is broken, no different, than any other federal law that gets broken, there is there's a consequence to that. And so that consequence is still in place.
I've got more coming up with the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, but first I want to talk to you about my partners at American Alternative. The markets have been experiencing some volatility with these brief rallies, and then they're quickly erased by the sharp sell-offs, and the dollar continues to weaken on the international markets, but gold has surged to a new all-time record high. Wall Street analysts are warning of persistent market stress and advising their biggest clients to seek safety now. When markets swing this violently, your retirement savings are extremely vulnerable. It's during these uncertain times that people need stable assets. For thousands of years, that asset has been gold, and that's why I'm proud to endorse American Alternative Assets. They take a different approach to precious metals. They know you, they get to know your family, they get to know your needs, and they know precious metals protection is not for everybody. That's why they only work with the people that they know they can help. They provide quarterly check-ins to ensure your strategy stays on track. 30% of their customers return and refer family and friends. American Alternative Assets is offering our listeners a free wealth protection guide and up to a 5% bonus on your first purchase. So call today. It's 877-522-GOLD, or you can visit tudorsgold.com right now. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect your wealth and secure your future today. Again, that's 877-522-GOLD, or visit tudorsgold.com. Now stay tuned. We'll be right back. So what is your response to the Trump administration, the administration that you're a part of, freezing this money that's going to higher ed, that's going to Harvard because of the campus activism? And this is something that there's been folks on both sides of this issue, but there are certainly a lot of people who have suffered from this. I would say it goes beyond activism. We're talking about harassment on these college campuses that is being allowed. So can you explain a little bit to us about the mindset behind freezing those funds?
Well, it actually started with Columbia University, and I think it was very evident when we saw last year, and then again just a few months ago, students on campus that not only were just being harassed, I mean, locked in libraries, other students pounding on glass walls saying "Death to Israel, Death to USA." Faculty was attacked. I mean, this was a safety issue. Not only was it, a civil rights issue, but it was a safety issue as well. Not to be confused, it was definitely not a First Amendment issue, because the president and this administration certainly does not disagree with anyone to have the right to peaceful protest or differences of opinion or on campuses, having public and open debate. But when you start impacting the safety and welfare of members of the campus community, that can't be tolerated. And so we brought those issues forward to the president of Columbia, and are continuing to work with them. So other universities now have come under that same review, Harvard being one. And so we'll continue to make sure, as the president promised during his campaign, that he will not tolerate discrimination of any kind on campus, but especially, anti-Semitism, because it was just so flagrant.
I think it's interesting the way that you present that, because it's so important for people to understand, because the other side actually agrees with you, even though they're not going to. I just mentioned our radical attorney general, but let me be very clear that a few months back, when this was happening on the University of Michigan's campus, she did arrest these people that were harassing students. She arrested them, and she's coming down pretty hard on them. There has been a lot of pushback from Democrats in the state of Michigan, some Democrats, more of the progressive side, saying this is ridiculous. She shouldn't have. They were peacefully protesting. That's the difference. They weren't peaceful. And that's what you're saying. You have to be peaceful.
It does have to be peaceful. And when you jeopardize, the safety and welfare of other students, that is an infringement on their civil rights. And so we just absolutely cannot allow that. And I think that college professors have to take not professors, college presidents have to take pretty swift action to make sure that those kinds of protests don't get out of hand, because we have seen that there can be more and more injuries if it's not dealt with right away.
And even preventing students from getting an education. You should not be able to bar students from going to their classes. The university should not be accepting that there are students who are paying for an education that can't actually get into their classroom because a protester is stopping them.
Yeah, absolutely. There again, that's a civil rights issue. There's it's just like you said, the students or scholarship payments or parents who are expecting to be able to send their children to a safe environment and get the education that they're paying for.
Right.
And that's not an unrealistic expectation.
Right, exactly. Stay tuned for more with Secretary Linda McMahon. But first, let me tell you about a great story from my partners at GenuCell. It's heartwarming and refreshingly true. 25 years ago, a woman just like us wanted her youthful glow back. Phyllis walked into her neighborhood pharmacy in Colonia, New Jersey, and asked the pharmacist for an antioxidant cream for her wrinkles. But instead of grabbing something behind the counter, he was like, let me make you one overnight. So Phyllis uses this cream for 3 days, and then she goes to her dermatologist, and he literally thought she had work done. So obviously, Phyllis was so happy, she wanted to brag about the pharmacy and the pharmacist who made the life-changing cream. And that is, believe it or not, how GenuCell skincare was born. That was 25 years ago. GenuCell has shipped millions of orders, and they still have that same philosophy: antioxidants, that same natural base, and the same chef in the kitchen, celebrating 25 years. GenuCell is now offering the best pricing since Phyllis walked into Georgia's pharmacy. And right now you can save over 70% off GenuCell's complete skincare package, featuring the GenuCell under eye bags and puffiness serum. It's awesome. I love it. The dark spot corrector, you really do see a change. And some of these products, you get immediate results in minutes, and you'll look 5, 10, even 15 years younger. That's guaranteed, or your money back. So go to genucell.com/Dixon. That's genucell.com/Dixon. Every order includes free shipping, so use Dixon at checkout for that extra discount. Again, that's genucell.com/Dixon. It's GENUCEL.com/Dixon. Now stay tuned. We'll be right back. Before I let you go, I want to ask you if there's anything you can share. You were in the first administration also. You went from that to the Secretary of Education. So different roles. You were in the small business before that. Now you are in education, different roles. Behind the scenes, can you tell us a little bit about what it's like when the president comes to you and says, I need you to serve?
Well, it was very interesting because when the president and I did have this discussion and he talked to me about serving as the Secretary of Education, I told him, I said, Mr. President, I don't come from the world of education. I've been in the business world, and that's why, the SBA seemed to be, such a good fit for me. And he said, but here's the thing. He said, I really do want to close the Department of Education. He said, I want to get rid of the bureaucracy of it. He said, I don't need an educator. He said, I need a business executive, a leader, a manager, someone who knows how to do that. He said, you're perfect for this job. And so I agreed to take on this role and to serve him in the country to the best of my ability.
And I think it's meaningful that you did agree to serve twice, because there have been a lot of criticisms of Donald Trump. And I was actually just talking to someone about this over the weekend. I said, how many people who have worked with him in his businesses or even in the White House have really come out and ever said anything negative about him? People love him.
Well, he's a great boss. And I'll tell you what's really good. He understands so much what he is asking you to do. And he's very probative in his questions. He expects you to fully know and understand what it is that you're doing. He listens very well when you're with him, but he expects action, and so we do work very well together. And plus, I've known him for almost 30 years now.
Well, we've been impressed with what the administration has done so far and very impressed with what you've done. I'm so grateful you were here today to talk to us today. U.S. Secretary Linda McMahon, thank you.
Thank you, Tudor.
And thank you all for joining us on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. For this episode and others, go to TudorDixonPodcast.com, the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And join us next time. Have a blessed day.